Modernize your dialogues with low code. For the agenda that we have today, we're going to go through dialogues, the what and why, some of the traditional approaches that we used to do, the intro to Power Platform, our low code solution. Chad's going to do an amazing demo for you. You're going to love it. And then we're going to finish it off with some best practices. My name is Eric Jorgensen. I'm a developer here at Stoneridge. I have been for about 5 years. I work a lot with the Power Platform and a lot of integrations as well between the Power Platform and various other things. And Chad?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Chad Althouse. I'm a senior functional consultant at Stoneridge. Been here about 2 years. I've been working in manufacturing operations, dynamics consulting for 9 years. My background is actually mechanical engineering, so that's where I come from. I worked at end users, been a speaker in the community, and just love. I geek out over this stuff. So Eric and I have had fun. So want to talk a little bit about what are dialogues. If you're at this session, you probably have some idea, or maybe you're just curious. I don't know. But what are they and why do we care? And this is not scientific in any way, but my way I see them, they're pop-up windows, some sort of a pop-up window. It's asking for the user to take action, usually to do some sort of input, pick an option, select something. They're usually triggered when a user actually clicks it to open that up and then prompts them to take some action. And it's really focused on just a subset of fields. So some of these things could be done on a form, but having it as a pop-up, you can see the rest of the form is grayed out, and it really focuses the attention and drives them to do some specific process. And Microsoft uses these throughout their applications, especially Dynamics 365. You can see this lookup address is an example of one. When you're on a quote and you'd like to copy fields onto the quote, the address fields, and you want to select them from an existing address, this dialog walks you through that. Another classic use case is the qualify lead. If we have the qualify lead settings turned on, it will prompt us for these options, and it asks us, do you want to create an account? Do you want to create a contact? Do you want to create an opportunity? And you have the chance to change all three of those options. They've got defaults, and there's a clear communication of what's being done and what you are going to do when you hit OK. So that, and then it also, another call out, it gives you that notification once it finishes that tells you, hey, the lead was successfully qualified. It confirms that something went right. And so those are some of the basic things I see with pop-ups and with dialogues and how that looks. So our scenario that we're talking about today, we're going to have a demo, and I want to introduce the use case, what we're kind of setting up here. It's a field service environment. We're tracking time and expenses. We're going to focus on the expenses here, and they want to know which work orders the expense was for. You can see in this example, it's a hotel expense for the week of February 26th, and it was for $250, and it was logged against work order number 7. But sometimes they need to split that one work order or that one expense between 2 different work orders. And so the portion of one expense needs to be moved onto another expense and related to another work order. So we're going to basically duplicate the first expense, and then on the second expense, it's going to have a new work order. The user is going to trigger this. They will be the one to take action and initiate this process. They'll need to enter the dollar amount for the new work order and select what that work order is. The new expense is going to be automatically created with whatever amount they enter, and then the original expense needs to be decremented by that same amount. And so in this example, what we'll show in a few minutes is that $250 125 needs to go on work order 7 and 125 needs to go to work order 6 because, while they're at the customer site, they worked on 2 different jobs and they stayed in the hotel once, right? So that's kind of the scenario with that. Another caveat is there are some related records behind that expense that need to be copied with it. And so there's some complexity in bringing those over as well.
All right. I'm going to go through some of the traditional approaches that we used to do in past versions of Dynamics 365 CE or CRM, however you wanted to do that back in the day. Something like this may be pretty familiar to you. It's a common dialog box that you're probably used to seeing. Like I said, you'll notice that it's pretty basic, pretty simplistic. There's only 2 pieces or 2 buttons, I should say, OK and cancel. So it's not. These are basic pop-up forms that are not actionable. I can't enter in any information. It's really hard to do. You could get a little bit more complex. In the old UI, you could build something. This is very similar to how you would build an old workflow. You could really get into the weeds with something like this. It's meant mostly for very simple guided processes with very little system integration. So, and the most important thing about this whole deal is you can't do it in the new UI anyway. So we need to think of something better. You'll notice here too, this is what it would look like as the pop-up of something more complex with that template editor. You'll notice it almost looks like an alien object at this point, with the way that we are doing it with the modern UI or the new UI that you're used to seeing. This feels a little bit more clunky, a little bit less, aesthetically pleasing. Some of the things that we used to have to do, for this, and as Chad said, the original purpose of this, the original requirement when we set out to do this was, okay, we need to have someone that can do the HTML code on the front. We need then someone to go ahead and build the C# plugin to make it actionable. And then you could probably throw in a bunch of JavaScript. So you could really get into weeds with some really customized stuff. And with all that, it can be really costly for that effort because of the time that maybe a developer needs to work on it, or a couple developers. And then something else too here is you're working directly with APIs. So let's say you wanted to touch another system, you need to actually know how to get into that API through the backend code. And with that, actually, we're going to show you some of the new cool ways, and Chad's going to talk about the Power Platform a little bit more.
So we're introducing a new era that Microsoft brought to us in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And so the Power Platform brings in this new era of low code possibilities. So the Power Platform is Microsoft's low code platform, and it really just connects. It's the glue that integrates the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft 365, Azure, Dynamics 365, and so much more. And you've got Power BI for the visualization of data. Power Apps are actionable. They're applications that you can design to build, and that's where Dynamics 365 sits. They're both model-driven and Canvas apps. So model-driven are the ones that look like Dynamics 365 with a navigation, and you just kind of plug the fields on a form, whereas Canvas apps are much more, you design exactly what you want it to look like. So it could look like garbage or it could look incredible, and you're responsible for every aspect of that. Power Automate is the process automation tool. Power Virtual Agents, this is where all throughout the Copilot buzzword, this is where Copilot lives, basically, is being able to interact with things. And it's got all the infusion of the AI that we have nowadays. Power Pages are the public-facing websites that you can have. You can also use them internally. And the foundation for most of this, we've got the data connectors that allow us to reach out to other systems without the need to write complex APIs. So the work is already done for us. AI Builder brings in the AI. You can infuse that in most of these pieces here. Dataverse is the backend for Power Platform and for Power Platform applications and Dynamics 365. And PowerFX allows us to write low-code expressions more similar to Excel to take action in systems. So we can write expressions to actually update records or create records, all using low-code language that is more in line with Excel than a programming language. So for this application, we used these for the ones you can see a little bit bolder here. Power Apps, we used custom pages. That's Microsoft's convergence of the model-driven and the Canvas worlds. And so we can have Canvas elements where we freeform, we can design the interface from scratch. We have that element within the model-driven application. And so that's where we're using Power Apps. Within that, we can leverage the data connectors. So when we create our pop-up window, we can have data that is visible or sent out to numerous other systems. I think it might be more than 1,000 now. It's in the hundreds and hundreds of connectors, and those are all different applications and systems that are Microsoft and also owned by other companies that we can reach out to without being a developer, without knowing any code. We can interact with those systems. And so in a pop-up, we could actually have data that someone selects that's living on a SQL server or living in a legacy application somewhere. And so we can actually reference that, or we could send data to another system using a pop-up like this. And it all is in the low code realm. Dataverse is obviously the back end, and PowerFX is how we're able to do some of those complex actions within the custom page.
All right, and so now we're going to kind of talk about the solution that we have here. Some of the things that we're using for the solution that Chad's going to display here shortly. We're using for the responsive custom page, we're using some modern controls. Those are the nice look and feel of the apps that you're used to working with. You know, if you're on the sales or customer service Dynamics CE apps, model-driven apps, that those modern controls have that same look and feel, or can. The responsive design, you know, something to where you're expanding and extracting, you know, we want it to move with it, and we want it to really have that nice look and feel to it. Simple buttons to take actions on there. The expressions in the PowerFX for those Dataverse records to update, create, whatever we need to do. Those PowerFX buttons are really, or expressions are really powerful. We like to show some validation for the user input to show that they're actually doing something. And then error handling will be done in the app itself, actually, or part of it anyways. And then the modern commands that we have going on is in the new command designer. If many of you used to write, you know, make buttons for up in the ribbon, you actually had to go to Xterm Toolbox and do ribbon workbench, which is still a very useful tool. But with the new modern commands, you can do that right within the Power Platform. And then finally, we're going to have some reusable JavaScript function to open the custom page. So you're able to actually take that piece. You want to build another control of some kind. You know, the thought is we could take that, put that right into the next button that you want to put in, or whatever it might be, to pop that up.
Absolutely.
And with that, Chad's going to take you into this beautiful demo.
All right. Thank you so much. Give me just a minute here while I switch over. All right. So here we're going to start looking at, oh, apologize. Technology is always fun. All right. So this is the modern command designer. And I just want to call out, I'm looking at the main form command bar. If you haven't seen this before, this is Microsoft is now giving us the opportunity to create new buttons with a modern interface that can fit in with the legacy buttons. And so we're able to create the split expense button, and we're telling it we want to use a JavaScript function. So we're calling this open custom pages dialog function in JavaScript. And then we have a number of parameters that we're passing to that. Like I said, the function is made so it's very dynamic. So we can plug and play this same expression, the same library and function into other settings. So if we create other dialogues, we'll use the same function there. And we just have to change things like what is the name of the table that we're operating on? What do we want the dialog window to be titled? This is the name of the custom page itself, and we've got the dimensions of the window that we actually want to pop up. So we can control how big and how high, height and width. Those are the two numbers there. And so we've got that programmed in here. And then, like I said, that's calling this JavaScript function. It's reusable. We try to make it as generic as possible. And so it's just called Open Custom Pages Dialog. This might be overwhelming to you. I'm not a developer, but I was able to figure this out. And it's pretty basic, and it's supposed to be just plug and play. So you shouldn't have to know so much how to use this, but essentially plug and play for any application. Just put it in a new instance and tell it which custom page and how big you want it. And that's kind of the idea with this. I'll show you the editor here. This is the custom page editor. It looks like a Canvas app because it essentially is. Custom pages have some small differences, but they ultimately are designed to be embedded within the model-driven applications, and they feel just a lot more native than a traditional Canvas app. And one thing, like Eric mentioned, we're leveraging the modern controls. So if you go to Insert Controls, there's the classic set of controls, and we're using the modern ones. The modern ones allow it to look and feel just like the new look and feel in model-driven applications that rolled out this year. And so we have a number of different containers that we're using here that allows it to have a responsive layout. So if we decide to change the size of this dialog, then everything will adjust as it needs to. And so it'll take up the horizontal and the vertical width as it needs to fill that space. And that's kind of how it was built. So you can see each of the components, and we'll look at it here in just a minute. I'll highlight real quick. You can see this button for splitting is right here, and it's grayed out. And I'll just put it in preview for a quick second, and let me show you the button here is actually set to do a big PowerFX expression. So this is the low code language. It is overwhelming. It takes a learning curve. So it is not something that someone who's never done this before can jump into. And we've got some great resources, and we have a great wealth of knowledge internally. So it definitely is not for the faint of heart. But I'm sure you've seen Excel formulas that are just as big. In any case, it's creating a new expense with the entered amount using a patch expression. And then we're actually handling errors right here. If there are any errors, we're going to return them back to the user to let them know. And it's going to show up as an error message to say, hey, something went wrong. And then if there is no issue, we're actually going to decrement that original expense. So first we have to create the new expense with whatever the user entered, and then we have to decrease the amount of the original record. And we also want to check for errors again there. And ultimately, if everything is successful, we want to navigate the user into that new record. And we've got a little loading spinner that's running while that operation is in process as well. So let's see it in action here. I'm in the field service application. I've got this expenses table, and I've got this $250 that Simon Rayleigh logged for his hotel against work order 7. But we know that Simon actually worked on work order 6 and 7 while he was staying at the hotel that week. And so we want to use this split expense button. I'll click the button. It'll open the dialog. So you can see when I clicked that modern command button, it used JavaScript to open the custom page that we told it to open. And now we're able to enter an amount that we want to split. And this is set up so it won't take it if I type in something that's not a number. If I type in a number that's too high, then it's going to leave -$5. Well, we can't do that. And if I put in 125, then I'm able to do that. And I can see the split expense button becomes blue. New work order is an optional field, but I am going to move this 125 onto work order number 6. And let me go ahead and hit split, that little loading spinner, and then it navigates us into the new record because everything succeeded. And so that's the use case with that. And then once I have this new one, I could then again, I could split it if I wanted. Maybe I want $50 to move back to work order 7. I don't know. Or I can hit cancel because I don't actually need to. So that's a little bit of how it actually works in action. So you can see button, it looks totally native. When I open this dialog with the modern controls, everything looks and feels very much like a model-driven application. You've got the blue underlined, the theming is on brand. It just creates a really clean interface and experience for the users. All right, I think that's all for the demo right now. So I'll hand it over to Eric to talk a little bit about best practices as we move forward.
Yeah. And so, with the demo, obviously we could show that thing. It could take us an hour and a half to show all the fun stuff that's in there. But you get a really good idea of what this does and the power of custom pages / dialogues that we can create. So for some best practices, biggest thing is to keep it simple. If you'll see this modern design here, you'll see this design that we have. 3 inputs, not difficult to see. It's keeping track of it. But we want the end user to really not get frustrated with it and just have that ease of use. So always have that in the back of the mind. We use the modern controls again for that seamless look, and you can see here on this slide that it looks just like the model-driven app, like Chad said. Consider once again containers for that responsive app, to where like I said, in this particular case, you can shrink, you can grow, and it's going to grow and it's going to be responsive in the way so it doesn't get too small or too big depending on what screen you're on. Have a clear call to action when you're doing this. In this case, it's split expense. There's only 2 buttons to choose from: split expense and cancel, and the Power App X is going to do all the work in the background. So you're taking that difficult part away from the end user and just saying, I'm just going to put this on this work order. We're good. Split that expense and we should be fine. Handle those errors proactively if you can. With our particular, you saw the demo, if you put in the wrong amount, hey, it says, no, that's not going to work. And we took away that split expense button. We're warning the owner or the user right away that this is the reason why it's not going to work. So that's always fun. And also on top of that, you can have, if something, when the data is processing in the background, when you press split expense and something happens, like it always, something that can happen, we want a way to catch that error. You can just have maybe a pop-up or saying, hey, this didn't go, do it again, whatever it might be. And then consider what to do after you press the action. So in this case, it was splitting that expense. Once Chad split that expense, it opened up that whole new record. You saw everything right there. That gives the user, hey, I see that the button I pushed did something. So it doesn't necessarily have to do on, adding, opening up a record, but maybe refreshing the page to see the work that you've done. You can add that right into that code. And, it's always good to see, because sometimes you press a button and you don't know if it worked until you start searching around for it. So it's always good to have that kind of transaction. And then finally, low code doesn't mean low effort. You saw the Power FX expression that you had. As Chad also said, we're pretty knowledgeable here at Stone Ridge. We've seen all these expressions. Going out on your own, looking at the Microsoft documentation, there's some wonderful documentation. There's some wonderful people that really have a passion for this type of stuff. So it's not low effort, but it is low code. So going out there, playing with it yourself is great advice. And then here, to wrap things up, we're just gonna send it back over.
That's right. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, we just coming out of the session hope that you consider the low code approach. So ultimately, Microsoft has this idea of the citizen developer, and there are different mixed feelings on that, but ultimately they're trying to democratize application development. So these ultimately make it faster to build applications. They make it less costly and easier to sustain. And they also look more in line with the Microsoft applications. So there are numerous benefits of why we want to do this. So consider going low code. If you have any deprecated classic dialogues and the classic interface that you never replaced because they don't work in the Unifit interface, then replace those. And if you have any professional code HTML web resources or things like that, consider replacing those with something that fits more into the application, like what we showed here. Lastly, read up, practice. It's all a steep learning curve. It really is, but the barrier to entry is low. And so you can get in and start playing around and trying to do some of this stuff. And ultimately, you'll have questions. We're here for you. We are your partner, and we want to help. And if you don't get jazzed up about this stuff, we do. So we'd love to come alongside you and partner with you. We do, if you can do the low code part, but you can't do the custom development that is needed to open the thing or, whatever, we're here for you. So